The massive council chamber stretched out like a small city made of crystal and light. Daniel Hayes walked slowly across the shining floor, his shoes making soft sounds that echoed in the huge space. Above him, the ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds that looked like they came from some alien world. Around him sat representatives from 47 different species, each one stranger than the last. Some looked like giant insects with too many legs. Others floated in the air like clouds of colored gas. A few resembled rocks that somehow moved and talked. Daniel wore a simple gray suit that looked plain and boring compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by everyone else in the room. He carried only a small electronic tablet in his hands. Other delegates had brought entire teams of helpers and massive holographic displays. Daniel was alone except for 3 people from Earth who waited in the back of the room. They could not help him now. This moment was his alone. At the center of the chamber sat the Archon, the leader of the council. Its name was Vorath, and it looked like nothing Daniel had ever imagined. It had 12 arms or legs, he could not tell which, and its body seemed to shift colors as it moved. Vorath had been leading this council for longer than human civilization had existed. The Archon gestured with several of its limbs. The movement meant Daniel could speak now. He had practiced this moment for months, traveling to 17 different star systems to meet with junior diplomats who barely listened to him. He knew what would happen today. They had already decided before he even arrived. Daniel stepped up to the speaker platform. His voice was amplified across the chamber so everyone could hear. He began his speech carefully, using the formal words that galactic diplomacy required. He told them about the problem between 2 powerful species called the Krell and the Xanthar. These 2 civilizations were preparing for war. Millions would die. Entire planets would be destroyed. Daniel explained that Earth wanted to help stop this war before it started. Humans could be neutral mediators, fair judges who had no reason to favor one side over the other. Before he could finish his first paragraph, he heard it. Laughter. It started with the Krell delegate, whose mouth parts clicked together in a sound their translator turned into mocking laughter. Then the Xanthar representative, a being made of pure energy trapped in a crystal shell, began pulsing with colors that meant the same thing: amusement, dismissal, mockery. The laughter spread through the chamber like a wave. Daniel stopped talking. He stood there on the platform holding his tablet, while dozens of alien species laughed at him. Some laughed quietly. Others made loud sounds that their translators could barely handle. A few did not laugh but looked at him with expressions that were somehow worse. Pity Vorath did nothing to stop them. The Archon simply waited until the laughter died down naturally, which took almost a full minute. When silence finally returned, Vorath spoke with a voice that dripped with condescension. The Archon pointed out that humans had only been part of the galactic community for 42 years. The Krell and Xanthar had been advanced civilizations for over 15,000 years each. What possible qualification did humanity have to mediate their conflict? What could humans teach species that had been traveling between stars when Earth was still in its ice age? Daniel had prepared answers for these questions. He had charts and graphs and historical examples from Earth showing successful mediations. He had statistics and analysis. But as he looked at the faces around him, some not even faces at all but sensory organs he barely understood, he realized none of it would matter. They had not come here to listen. They had come to laugh at the primitive humans who thought they belonged at the adult table. He tried again anyway. Daniel talked about fresh perspectives about how sometimes those too close to a problem cannot see the obvious solutions. He talked about neutrality and fairness. He talked about preventing unnecessary death. The Krell delegate interrupted him. The insect-like being clicked its mouthparts in patterns that the translator turned into sharp, cutting words. They had watched stars be born and die while humans were still learning to make fire. How dare Earth presume to teach them wisdom? More laughter followed. Even the usually quiet species from the outer edge of the galaxy seemed amused. The floating gas beings swirled in patterns that their entire species found hilarious. Daniel felt his face grow hot with embarrassment and anger, but he kept his expression neutral. That was what diplomats did. They stayed calm no matter what. Vorath raised one of its primary limbs. The gesture meant silence, and the chamber obeyed immediately. The Archon announced that the Council would now vote on whether to accept Earth's offer of mediation services. Daniel knew what was coming, but protocol required him to stay at the platform and watch. Each delegate triggered their vote through a mental connection to their seat. The results appeared on holographic screens throughout the chamber, visible to everyone. 46 votes against Earth's proposal. 0 votes in favor. 1 abstention from a species Daniel had never even heard of before today. Vorath announced the results formally. Earth's offer was rejected. The Archon suggested that humanity focus on settling its own colonies, rather than interfering in matters far beyond human experience or capability. The words were polite on the surface, but the meaning underneath was clear. "Go away, children. The adults are talking." Daniel stood there for a moment longer. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them they were making a mistake, that millions would die because of their arrogance. But he did none of those things. He simply bowed formally, maintaining proper diplomatic protocol even in complete defeat, and turned to leave. As he walked back across that long crystal floor, he passed row after row of alien delegates. None of them were laughing anymore, but that was only because they had already moved on to other business. Behind him, he heard Vorath introducing the next topic for discussion, something about mining rights in some distant cluster of stars. His proposal had lasted less than 10 minutes from start to finish. Humanity's attempt to help prevent a galactic war had been rejected, mocked and forgotten in the time it took most people to drink a cup of coffee. The doors closed behind him with a soft sound. His small team waited in the antechamber beyond. Lieutenant Amy Carter stood at attention, her face tight with barely controlled anger. Dr. Paul Stevens sat staring at his tablet, shaking his head slowly. Commander Lisa Grant leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, looking disgusted. Amy spoke first, her voice shaking slightly. "They did not even consider it. 46-0. How is that even possible?" Paul looked up from his tablet. "Actually, it is worse than that. The 1 abstention was just a courtesy vote. That means it was essentially unanimous. Every species in the galaxy just told us we do not matter." Daniel loosened his tie. His throat felt tight. "Let us get back to the ship. I need to file my report to Earth." They walked through the diplomatic quarter of Station Harmony, the massive space station where the Council met. Beings from across the galaxy moved through the corridors. Many stopped to stare at the humans. Word had already spread about what happened in the Council chamber. Daniel could see it in their eyes or sensor organs or whatever they used to perceive the world. The humans had embarrassed themselves. The humans had been put in their place. Back on the human ship, Daniel sat alone in his quarters. He wrote his report carefully, choosing each word with precision. He described the rejection clinically, professionally, without letting his emotions show on the page. But inside he felt something burning. Not just embarrassment or anger. Something else. A determination that what happened today would not be the end of this story. He encrypted the report and sent it through the quantum relay system. It would reach Earth in about 18 hours. Daniel wondered how the leadership back home would react. Would they be angry? Embarrassed? Would they blame him for the failure? He did not know yet that his report would change everything. He did not know that Earth had been preparing for exactly this moment. He did not know that humanity's response would make the entire galaxy stop laughing and start paying very close attention. For now, Daniel simply sat in his quarters, staring at the stars through his window, and wondered if humanity would ever be taken seriously by the species that ruled the galaxy. Secretary Martin Ellis read the report from Daniel Hayes 3 times in his office in Geneva. Each time he read it, his jaw got tighter and his anger grew stronger. He had worked in diplomatic service for 30 years, starting as a young assistant and working his way up to secretary. He had seen failures and setbacks before, but this was different. This was not just a rejection. This was mockery. This was 46 civilizations telling Earth that humanity did not matter, that human voices were not worth hearing. They had laughed at Daniel Hayes. They had laughed at Earth. Martin stood up and walked to his window. Below him, the city of Geneva spread out under gray clouds. Earth had changed so much in the 42 years since first contact with alien life. Humanity had been so excited to join the galactic community. They had tried so hard to prove themselves worthy, to show they belonged among the stars, and the galaxy had just told them they would never belong. His secure communication line started blinking with an incoming call. President Catherine Moore was calling him. Martin pressed the button and her face appeared on his screen. She looked tired and angry. Catherine did not waste time with greetings. "Martin, I have read the report. I have also been getting calls from the military chiefs. They are not happy about this," Martin nodded. "Neither am I, Madam President." Catherine leaned back in her chair. "The question is what we do about it. We have options that Ambassador Hayes was not authorized to discuss with the Council." Martin knew exactly what she meant. Earth had been careful during its first years among the stars. Humans had been polite and respectful, even a bit submissive. But that did not mean Earth had been sitting idle. In secret facilities on 6 continents, human scientists and engineers had been developing technologies that the Galactic Council knew nothing about. "You want to show them what we are really capable of," Martin said quietly. Catherine nodded. "I want them to understand that dismissing Earth is a mistake. The Krell and Xanthar are about to start a war that will kill millions and destabilize 3 sectors of space. We offered to help prevent that. They laughed at us." Martin thought carefully before responding. Revealing our capabilities could backfire badly. "They already see us as primitive. If they see us as primitive and threatening, that could be worse." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "That is why I am not giving orders, Martin. I am asking for your recommendation. You know the Council better than anyone else on Earth. What should we do?" Martin thought about Daniel standing alone on that platform while alien species laughed at him. He thought about all the human diplomats over the years who had been patronized, ignored, or outright mocked just for trying to participate in galactic affairs. "We speak," Martin said finally, "but not through normal diplomatic channels. Not with proposals and requests and polite suggestions. We speak once, clearly, and we make absolutely sure that every species in the galaxy hears us." "What exactly are you proposing?" Martin explained his plan in detail. As he talked, Catherine's expression changed from curiosity to concern to something that looked like grim satisfaction. When he finished, Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "That is bold. Some people would call it reckless. Some people would call what the Council did to Ambassador Hayes an insult that demands a response," Martin replied. Catherine nodded slowly. "Draft your message, Martin. I want to review it before we proceed. And get me Admiral Helen Price on the line. If we are going to do this, I want our fleet ready." "Ready for what exactly?" "For whatever comes next." Over the next 72 hours, Martin worked with a small team to create Earth's response. They debated every single word, revised every sentence, polished every phrase. They brought in linguists to make sure the message would translate correctly into all major galactic languages. They brought in military strategists to predict possible reactions from different species. They brought in psychologists who specialized in alien psychology to analyze how the message might be interpreted. The final message was just under 3 minutes long. On a Tuesday morning by Earth's calendar, the message was transmitted simultaneously to every member world of the Galactic Council. It also went to every independent star system, and to the 17 major news networks that serve the civilized galaxy. Earth broadcasted on every standard frequency and several non-standard frequencies that human scientists had discovered but never mentioned before. There was no way for anyone to ignore it. For 3 minutes, humanity spoke to the entire galaxy. The message started with a simple image: Earth as seen from orbit, a blue and white sphere against the darkness of space. No fancy graphics or alien architecture, just humanity's home planet, beautiful and small and fragile looking. Then Secretary Martin Ellis appeared on screen. He sat at a simple desk with the flags of Earth's nations behind him. His expression was calm and professional, but there was something cold in his eyes, something that made viewers uncomfortable. "This is Secretary Martin Ellis of the United Earth Government," he said. His voice was steady and clear. "I am addressing the Galactic Council and all sentient species who are listening." He paused to let the translators work, making sure every species heard his words in their own language. 43 hours ago, the Galactic Council rejected Earth's proposal to mediate the dispute between the Krell Hive and the Xanthar Federation. The vote was 46 against, 0 in favor. Our ambassador reported that many council members found humanity's offer amusing. They thought our inexperience in galactic affairs made our proposal laughable. Martin's hands were folded on the desk in front of him. He did not gesture dramatically or raise his voice. He simply spoke, and his words carried the weight of an entire planet behind them. The Council is correct that humanity is new to the galaxy. We have been traveling between stars for only 42 years. By galactic standards, we are infants. By our own standards, we are something else entirely. The image behind him changed. It showed Earth's moon, then Mars, then the outer planets of the solar system. Ancient history by galactic measures, but recent history by human ones. We are a species that went from first powered flight to standing on our moon in 66 years. We are a species that survived 2 global wars, multiple pandemics, and the threat of nuclear annihilation. We are a species that learned to split atoms, decode our own genetics, and create artificial intelligence before we ever left our own solar system. The images shifted again, showing humanity's first contact with the Valkorian survey ship that arrived in 2023, the moment when humanity learned it was not alone in the universe. When we learned of the galactic community, we chose cooperation over confrontation. We chose to learn from older species rather than assert ourselves through force. We accepted junior status in galactic affairs because we recognized our lack of experience. Martin's expression did not change, but his next words had an edge that made them feel dangerous. The Council mistook that choice for weakness. The image behind him changed dramatically. This time it showed something the galactic community had never seen before. Earth's military infrastructure. Not just the small ships that traveled to Station Harmony for diplomatic meetings, but the massive vessels that had been built in orbital shipyards hidden far from the regular trade routes. The ships were impressive even by galactic standards. They incorporated technologies that should not have been possible for such a young species. Gravitational manipulation systems, quantum shielding arrays, weapon systems based on principles that would make the Council's experts deeply uncomfortable. Humanity has been preparing, Martin continued calmly, not for war, though we are capable of it. Not for conquest, though we could attempt it. We have been preparing for the moment when we would need to prove that our voice deserves to be heard. The ships shown in the display moved through space with grace and power. They were not the largest ships in the galaxy, but their design suggested capabilities that went far beyond what anyone expected from Earth. That moment is now, Martin said. The Krell and Xanthar are positioning fleets for a conflict that will devastate civilian populations across 3 sectors. The Council has proven unable or unwilling to prevent this catastrophe. Humanity offers again to mediate this dispute. The image returned to Earth, that beautiful blue sphere that looked so peaceful against the darkness. This is not a threat. This is not an ultimatum. This is a statement of fact. Humanity has resources, technologies, and capabilities that the Council has never seen. We chose not to reveal them because we valued cooperation over competition, but we will not remain silent when we have the ability to prevent unnecessary death. Martin leaned forward slightly, his eyes seeming to look directly at every being watching across the galaxy. Earth spoke once. We will not speak again. The choice now belongs to the Council. Accept our mediation offer or reject it, knowing what that rejection truly means. Not the rejection of an inexperienced species, but the rejection of a potential ally who could have made a difference. The transmission ended. No music, no dramatic final image. Just Martin Ellis's calm face and then nothing. Within an hour, the galaxy exploded with reactions. News networks analyzed every frame of the transmission. Military experts tried to assess the capabilities of the ships Earth had revealed. Diplomats debated what humanity's message really meant. The first response came from the Valkorian delegation within an hour of Earth's transmission. Ambassador Talron sent a private message to the Earth Embassy on Station Harmony. The message was short but heavy with meaning. You have made either a grave miscalculation or a brilliant gambit. Within the day, we will know which. Across the galaxy, reactions came fast and varied wildly from species to species. On the Krell homeworld, military leaders gathered in their underground war chambers to watch Earth's transmission over and over. The ships humanity had revealed used design principles that directly countered traditional Krell tactics. Their strategists felt deeply uncomfortable realizing how little they actually knew about human capabilities. In the Xanthar Federation's capital city of pure energy, the High Council resonated with frequencies that translated to confusion and genuine concern. The Xanthar had always considered humanity barely more advanced than pre-spaceflight civilizations. Learning that Earth possessed quantum shielding technology forced them to completely recalculate their entire assessment of the human species, but the most significant reaction happened in the Galactic Council chamber itself. Archon. Vorath called an emergency session, just 12 hours after Earth's message. For the first time in 3 centuries, all 47 member species sent not just their regular ambassadors, but their highest-ranking officials. Leaders who normally never left their homeworlds made the journey to Station Harmony. The chamber that had been filled with scattered laughter just days before now hummed with tense, urgent conversations. Daniel Hayes received the summons to appear before the council again. He had watched Secretary Ellis's message with complicated feelings. Part of him felt pride that Earth was finally asserting itself. Part of him felt concerned about what it might cost. And a small, vindictive part of him felt satisfaction imagining the council's reaction to being challenged so directly. Now, walking back across that crystalline floor with his small team behind him, Daniel immediately felt the changed atmosphere. No one was laughing. The delegates watched him with expressions ranging from wariness to calculation to something that might have been grudging respect. Vorath's 12 limbs moved in agitated patterns. The Archon species used those movements to display emotional states, and right now Vorath was clearly disturbed. Ambassador Hayes, your government's transmission has caused considerable disruption to galactic affairs. Daniel kept his tone carefully neutral. Secretary Ellis spoke truthfully. Earth wishes only to prevent unnecessary conflict between the Krell and Xanthar. The Krell delegates' mandibles clacked together sharply. The sound no longer carried amusement. By threatening the council, your species revealed military capabilities you deliberately concealed. This violates first contact protocols. Commander Lisa Grant, standing slightly behind Daniel, allowed herself a small smile. The protocols the Krell mentioned were voluntary agreements, not binding treaties. Earth had never actually promised to reveal all of its technological developments to the Council. Dr. Paul Stevens leaned close to Daniel and whispered quietly, "The Xanthar representative has not spoken yet." "That is significant." Paul was right. The crystalline shell containing the Xanthar energy being pulsed with muted colors, but their delegate remained completely silent. That silence said more than words could. Daniel addressed the council carefully. Earth concealed nothing. We simply did not advertise capabilities that were not relevant to galactic commerce or normal diplomacy. The vessels shown in Secretary Ellis's message are purely defensive in nature and design. A delegate from the Outer Rim Systems spoke up. The Morvani had 3 heads that moved independently as they talked. Defensive? Those ships carry gravitational manipulation arrays. Such technology could destabilize the orbital mechanics of entire planets. Could, but will not, Daniel said firmly. Earth seeks only to mediate the Krell-Xanthar dispute. We have no territorial ambitions, no desire for conflict with any council member. Vorath's voice carried genuine confusion. Then why this dramatic display? Why reveal your capabilities in such a public fashion, rather than through proper diplomatic channels? Daniel paused. This was the critical moment. Not the revelation of Earth's technology, but the explanation of why it had been necessary. Because the council would not listen any other way, Daniel said simply.
3 days ago, I stood in this chamber and offered humanity's assistance in preventing a war.
The response was laughter, mockery, complete dismissal. Not because our proposal lacked merit, but because the council decided humanity's voice did not matter. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes or sensory organs as he could. Earth does not want special treatment. We do not want to be feared. We want what every species in this chamber already has. The opportunity to be heard and judged on the merit of our ideas rather than the age of our civilization. The chamber fell into complete silence. Then unexpectedly, the Xanthar delegate finally spoke. The human raises a valid concern. The energy being's voice resonated through its crystalline shell, translated into words by the chamber's systems. The council has grown complacent. We rely too heavily on established hierarchies. We assume that age automatically equals wisdom. Perhaps we have forgotten that innovation often comes from fresh perspectives and new ideas. The Krell delegates' mandibles clacked in sharp disagreement. The Xanthar speak from a position of weakness. Your Federation knows the Hive will prevail in any military confrontation. You seek human intervention out of desperation, not principle. We seek to avoid millions of deaths, the Xanthar responded, their colors shifting to patterns indicating anger. If the humans can facilitate a peaceful resolution, why should their youth disqualify them from trying? Vorath raised multiple limbs, demanding silence. The Archon turned its primary sensory cluster toward Daniel. Ambassador Hayes, if the Council were to accept Earth's offer of mediation, what exactly would your process involve? Daniel had prepared for this question days ago, but he had never truly expected to need the answer. He activated a holographic display from his tablet, showing a proposed timeline and framework for mediation. Earth suggests a neutral location outside both Krell and Xanthar-controlled space, a mediation team composed of human diplomats and military observers from both sides. We would facilitate direct negotiations with a focus on identifying underlying interests, rather than just stated positions and demands. The Morvani delegate observed carefully. This sounds like standard mediation protocol. What makes humanity uniquely qualified to handle this? Our complete lack of history with either party, Daniel answered. The Krell and Xanthar have been rivals for thousands of years. Every other council species has historical relationships with one or both that create implicit biases. Earth has no such entanglements. We can be truly neutral because we have no reason to favor either side. Or you are truly ignorant of the complexities involved, the Krell delegate muttered. But Daniel noticed that more delegates seemed to be considering the proposal seriously now. The revelation of Earth's hidden capabilities had done exactly what Secretary Ellis intended. It had not made humanity liked or admired, but it had made humanity impossible to simply dismiss and ignore. Vorath consulted briefly with several senior council members. Their communication happened too fast and in too many languages for the universal translators to keep up with. Finally, the Archon spoke again. The Council will vote once more on the human proposal. However, this vote will be conditional. If accepted, Earth will have 60 standard cycles to demonstrate meaningful progress in mediating the Krell-Xanthar dispute. If mediation fails or if Earth's intervention makes the conflict worse, humanity will forfeit all trading privileges and face severe restrictions on expansion for no less than 200 cycles. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. That represented a massive risk. If humanity failed, it would not just be a diplomatic embarrassment. It would be an economic and strategic disaster that would set Earth back decades in its development among the stars. But Secretary Ellis had been clear in his private instructions transmitted just before this session. If they offer you a chance, take it. Win or lose, Earth needs to make this attempt. Earth accepts those terms, Daniel said, keeping his voice steady despite the enormous weight of the decision. The voting began. Daniel watched the holographic displays as results appeared one by one. This time there was no laughter, no casual dismissal. Each delegate considered seriously before casting their vote. The future of Earth's place in the galaxy hung in the balance. When the final count appeared, Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. 29 votes in favor. 16 votes against, 2 abstentions. The proposal is accepted, Vorath announced formally. Earth is granted authority to mediate the dispute between the Krell Hive and the Xanthar Federation. May the wisdom of the ancients guide this endeavor toward peace. As Daniel turned to leave the chamber, he caught sight of Ambassador Talrin. The Velkorian delegate was watching him with an expression that clearly communicated a single message. Now the real work begins. Daniel walked back across that long crystal floor, knowing that Earth had won a second chance. But he also knew that this chance came with enormous pressure. Humanity had spoken once and forced the galaxy to listen. Now they had to. The neutral zone chosen for mediation was a barren moon circling a dead star in unclaimed space. No species had ever bothered to settle there because it offered nothing of value. That made it perfect for what Earth needed to accomplish. Human engineers transformed the empty moon in 27 days. They built a facility that deliberately incorporated no architectural style that would favor either Krell or Xanthar preferences. The mediation center was purely functional. Meeting rooms, living quarters, and communication arrays. Nothing fancy. Nothing that suggested one species mattered more than the other. Daniel led the Earth delegation. Commander Lisa Grant came as the military observer. Dr. Paul Stevens served as cultural advisor. 3 additional diplomats joined them. Karen White specialized in conflict resolution. Richard Cole understood interstellar law better than anyone else on Earth. Susan Park had expertise in xenopsychology and could read alien emotional states. The Krell arrived first in their massive warships. Their delegation was led by Military Commander Zax and Chief Negotiator Rax. The Krell stood 2 meters tall at the shoulder. They had 6 limbs, hard shell-like skin, and compound eyes that could see colors humans could not even imagine. Their mandibles clicked constantly, making sounds that translators turned into words but which also conveyed emotional meaning through rhythm and pattern. Commander Zax entered the facility with aggressive posture. We agreed to this mediation as a courtesy to the Council. The Hive's position is not open to negotiation. The disputed territories contain resources absolutely critical to our survival. Daniel greeted them with formal gestures of respect that he had practiced extensively. We appreciate your willingness to engage in dialogue, Commander. We believe solutions exist that can address both your needs and those of the Federation. The Xanthar arrived 6 hours later. Their delegation consisted of 3 energy beings: Diplomatic Envoy Lune, Strategic Coordinator Mara, and Resource Specialist Nex. They existed as patterns of light and energy inside crystalline shells that allowed them to interact with physical space and move through it. The Federation comes in good faith, Lune announced. Their shell pulsed with colors indicating sincerity. But we will not surrender territory that has belonged to us for 3,000 cycles simply because the Hive suddenly decides it wants our resources. The first formal session began badly. Daniel arranged the meeting room carefully. Krell on one side, Xanthar on the other, human mediators at the head of the table. He hoped to establish ground rules and create a framework for productive discussion. Instead, Commander Zax and Envoy Lune immediately began arguing about historical claims to the disputed territories. They raised grievances that stretched back thousands of years. Within 5 minutes, the discussion had collapsed into accusations and angry counter-accusations. The Hive betrayed the Treaty of Valtor. The Federation violated sacred breeding grounds. Your species has no concept of energy field integrity. Your species has no understanding of honor. Daniel let them argue for 20 minutes. He watched carefully, learning. Dr. Stevens took detailed notes mapping the emotional dynamics of the exchange. Commander Grant monitored both delegations' body language, distinguishing between genuine anger and performative outrage for the benefit of observers. Finally, Daniel stood up from his chair. Honored delegates, I need to stop this discussion immediately. Both sides turned to look at him. Daniel could feel the weight of their attention. This was the critical moment. Either he would establish credibility as a mediator, or he would confirm the Council's initial assessment that humanity was completely out of its depth. With all due respect, Daniel said carefully, this approach will not work. You have been having this exact same argument for centuries. Every point raised here has been raised before. Every counter-argument is familiar to both sides. You are not communicating with each other. You are performing for an audience. Commander Zax's mandibles clacked sharply in challenge. You presume to tell us how to conduct negotiations? I presume to point out that negotiation is not what is happening here. Daniel replied calmly. You are both stating positions you know the other side will never accept, which suggests that maybe positions are not what we should be discussing at all. Envoy Lune's containment shell pulsed with colors that might have indicated curiosity. What would the human suggest instead? Interests, Daniel said. Not what you want, but why you want it. The disputed territories represent your positions. What I need to understand are your underlying interests. He activated a holographic display showing the disputed territories, a cluster of 17 star systems rich in rare minerals and unusual energy formations. Commander Zax, you said these resources are critical to Hive survival. Can you explain specifically why? Zax's clicking slowed, becoming more careful and rhythmic. The translator software indicated this meant the Krell was choosing words with precision. The Hive is expanding rapidly. Our population increases by 12% each cycle. The minerals found in these territories are essential for constructing the biomechanical support systems our young require to survive their development stages, so your fundamental interest is sustaining population growth, Daniel said, making notes. He turned to the Xanthar. Envoy Lune, you mentioned these territories have belonged to your people for 3,000 cycles. What specifically do they provide to the Federation? The energy formations within these systems are unique in the known galaxy, Lune explained. Their colors shifted to indicate deep emotion. They allow our people to experience states of being that are unavailable anywhere else. These territories are not merely economically valuable. They hold profound cultural and spiritual significance to every Xanthar. So your fundamental interest is preserving culturally important sites, Daniel said, adding more notes. Over the next 3 days, Daniel and his team worked systematically to extract the underlying interests behind each side's rigid positions. The process moved slowly and often felt frustrating. Both delegations seemed uncomfortable abandoning their rehearsed arguments and examining the actual needs driving their conflict. But gradually, carefully, a clearer picture emerged. The Krell needed specific rare elements to support their rapidly growing population. The Xanthar needed access to unique energy fields that held deep cultural meaning for their entire civilization. Both species had framed the dispute in terms of territorial control, because that was how galactic conflicts had traditionally been structured for thousands of years. On the 4th day, Susan Park made a critical breakthrough. She had spent hours analyzing the detailed composition of every system in the disputed territories and comparing them to survey data from other regions throughout the galaxy. The rare elements the Krell need, she told Daniel privately, in a late-night meeting, exist in significant quantities in 17 systems throughout the disputed territories. But according to our comprehensive survey data, similar deposits exist in numerous locations throughout the Outer Rim, in completely unclaimed space. Daniel felt a surge of hope. And the energy formations the Xanthar value? Only found in 3 of the 17 disputed systems. The remaining 14 systems are economically valuable, but hold no cultural significance whatsoever to the Federation. Daniel saw the solution forming. So theoretically, the Krell could obtain everything they actually need without accessing all 17 systems. And the Xanthar could maintain what they truly care about by retaining control of just 3 specific systems. Theoretically, yes, Susan agreed. But getting both sides to accept a partial resolution instead of total victory will be extremely challenging. That night, Daniel sent an encrypted communication to Secretary Ellis back on Earth. The quantum relay allowed real-time conversation despite the vast distance. We might have found a viable path forward, Daniel explained. But it requires both sides to accept that they will not get everything they originally demanded. Martin's voice came back steady and calm. That is the fundamental nature of compromise, Daniel. The question is whether they will see partial success as acceptable or view it as total failure. There is another significant risk, Daniel admitted. If we propose this solution and both sides reject it, we will have revealed our entire strategy. We will not get another opportunity. Martin was quiet for a moment before responding. Daniel, you have done excellent work out there. Better than I honestly expected when I sent you. But remember why Earth pushed so hard for this opportunity, not just to solve this one particular dispute, but to prove that humanity deserves a seat at the table. Sometimes making the attempt matters more than the outcome. But failure means Earth faces 200 cycles of crippling restrictions. Then do not fail, Martin said simply. I have complete faith in you. So does President Moore. Show the galaxy what a human diplomat can accomplish. The next morning, Daniel called both delegations to the main meeting room. He had prepared the holographic display carefully, showing his proposed solution in clear visual terms. Honored delegates, I believe we have identified a resolution that genuinely serves both your fundamental interests. He activated the display. The 17 systems appeared color-coded. 3 systems glowed in Xanthar colors. 14 showed in neutral gray. The Xanthar Federation retains complete. The silence in the meeting room stretched on. Daniel watched both delegations carefully. He could see them communicating internally, using methods too subtle or too alien for humans to fully understand. The Krell's mandibles clicked in rapid patterns that their translators could not fully capture. The Xanthar's crystalline shells pulsed with colors that shifted faster than the human eye could properly track. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes, Envoy Loon spoke first. The Federation requires time to consult with our governing council back on the homeworld. This decision carries enormous significance for our entire civilization. Commander Zax's mandibles clacked in agreement. The Hive must also seek formal approval from our Queen Mother. Such matters cannot be decided by field commanders alone. Daniel nodded, keeping his expression neutral even though he felt relief flooding through him. They had not rejected the proposal outright. That was already more progress than he had dared to hope for. Of course, Daniel said respectfully. We understand completely that this decision requires careful consideration at the highest levels. Take whatever time you need. Over the next 10 days, both delegations maintained constant communication with their homeworlds using quantum relays and methods Earth's scientists still did not fully understand. Daniel and his team waited, trying not to obsess over every possible outcome. They refined the proposal, prepared detailed responses to potential objections, and tried very hard not to think about what failure would mean for Earth. Karen White spent hours running simulations of how the joint administration zones could function. Richard Cole drafted legal frameworks that would govern the shared territories. Susan Park compiled comprehensive geological surveys of the outer rim deposits that could supplement what the Krell would gain from the 8 transferred systems. Dr. Stevens observed both delegations carefully during meals and informal moments, trying to read their emotional states. The Xanthar seemed cautiously optimistic, he told Daniel one evening. The Krell are harder to read, but I think Commander Zax is genuinely considering the proposal seriously. Commander Grant was less optimistic. Military leaders do not like compromise. They are trained to think in terms of victory and defeat. Zax might convince himself that accepting less than total control represents unacceptable weakness. On the 11th day, both delegations requested a formal meeting. Daniel felt his heart racing as they all gathered in the main conference room once again. This was the moment. Either humanity's gamble would pay off, or Earth would face consequences that would echo for generations. Commander Zax and Envoy Loon stood across from each other. Centuries of rivalry and mutual suspicion were evident in their postures. Then, moving in a way that seemed almost choreographed, they both turned simultaneously to face Daniel. The Krell Hive accepts the human proposal, Commander Zax announced. Formally, the Xanthar Federation also accepts, Envoy Loon said in the same moment. Daniel felt an overwhelming wave of relief wash over him, but he maintained his professional composure. This was too important a moment to let emotions show. Honored delegates, Earth is deeply grateful for your willingness to choose dialogue over conflict. This agreement serves not just your 2 great civilizations, but the entire galactic community. The formal signing process took 3 full days. Legal experts from both species arrived, along with representatives from Earth who understood interstellar treaty law. They worked through every detail, every potential ambiguity, every possible point of future disagreement. The document grew longer and more complex with each passing hour. Karen White and Richard Cole barely slept during those 3 days. They reviewed every clause, every subclause, every footnote. They wanted to make absolutely certain that the treaty would hold up under any possible interpretation or challenge. When the final document was complete, it filled over 200 pages of dense legal text. But the core principles remained simple. 3 systems stayed with the Xanthar. 8 systems transferred to the Krell. 6 systems would be jointly administered with profits and resources split equally. And Earth would provide survey data and technical assistance to help the Krell establish operations in the unclaimed Outer Rim territories. The formal signing ceremony took place in the main conference room. Both delegations wore ceremonial garments that signified the importance of the occasion. Daniel represented Earth in a formal diplomatic uniform. Commander Zax applied ritual markings to his exoskeleton. Envoy Loon's crystalline shell had been polished until it gleamed. They signed using 3 different methods to accommodate their different physiologies. The Krell used biochemical signatures. The Xanthar used energy pattern imprints. Humans used old-fashioned digital signatures. All 3 were legally binding under galactic law. When it was finished, Daniel transmitted the news immediately to Secretary Ellis and to the Galactic Council. He sent a simple message that contained enormous meaning. Treaty signed, mediation successful, terms accepted by both parties. Back on Earth, Secretary Martin Ellis received the message in his office. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Then he walked to his window and looked out at Geneva below. Humanity had done it. Against all expectations, despite being mocked and dismissed, Earth had brokered peace between 2 ancient civilizations. He immediately called President Catherine Moore. "Madam President, we have a signed treaty." Catherine's face on the screen showed genuine emotion for the first time in months. Daniel actually pulled it off. He did more than that. According to his preliminary report, the framework he created for the joint administration zones is innovative enough that other species are already expressing interest. This could become a model for resolving territorial disputes throughout the galaxy. Catherine leaned back in her chair, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. Earth spoke once and the galaxy listened. Now we have proven that their attention was deserved. But even as celebrations began on Earth and at the mediation site, Daniel knew the real work was only beginning. The treaty existed on paper, but it needed to be implemented in reality. The jointly administered territories required entirely new governance structures. Mining operations needed to be established. Cultural sites needed proper protection protocols. And most importantly, centuries of mistrust between Krell and Xanthar needed to begin healing. Over the following weeks, Daniel and his team worked with both delegations to create the practical frameworks that would make the treaty function. They established joint oversight committees. They created dispute resolution procedures. They designed economic sharing formulas that both sides agreed were fair. Surprisingly, the joint administration zones became the most successful part of the entire agreement. Krell and Xanthar, who had been enemies for generations, found themselves working side by side in mining operations and research facilities. They discovered that they could cooperate when proper structures existed to manage their interactions. Susan Park's geological surveys proved remarkably accurate. The outer rim deposits contained even more of the rare elements than initially estimated. The Krell began establishing operations there with Earth technical assistance, which reduced pressure on the disputed territories even further. The 3 Xanthar cultural systems received special protection status. The Krell formally acknowledged their significance, and other galactic species began recognizing them as important heritage sites. Some Xanthar actually invited Krell delegations to visit and learn about the energy formations, beginning a cultural exchange that no one had anticipated. 2 months after the signing, Daniel received an unexpected communication from Archon Vorath. The council leader requested a private meeting at Station Harmony. Daniel made the journey wondering what the Archon wanted. When he arrived, Vorath greeted him with what seemed like genuine respect rather than the condescension from their first meeting. Ambassador Hayes, the council has observed the implementation of your treaty with great interest. The Krell-Xanthar agreement is functioning better than anyone expected. Both sides have shown remarkable commitment to making it work, Daniel said diplomatically. Perhaps, Vorath agreed, but the framework you created, the joint administration model, the focus on underlying interests rather than stated positions, these innovations have attracted attention. 3 additional territorial disputes have been resolved using modified versions of your approach. Daniel felt surprised. I was not aware other species had adopted our methods. That is why I requested this meeting, Vorath said. The Council wishes to formally acknowledge Earth's contribution. More than that, we wish to propose something unprecedented. The Archon activated a holographic display. It showed a proposal for something called the Galactic Mediation Corps, an independent body that would provide mediation services for conflicts throughout the galaxy. And at the top of the organizational chart, Daniel saw a position labeled Director, with a note suggesting it should be filled by a human representative. The Council wants Earth to lead this? Daniel asked, not quite believing what he was seeing. The Council wants Earth to help establish it, Vorath clarified. We recognize that humanity brings perspectives the galaxy needs. Fresh eyes that can see solutions older civilizations have missed. Daniel thought about how 2 years had passed since Daniel Hayes first stood before the Galactic Council and faced their mocking laughter. Now he walked through the corridors of Station Harmony with a confidence born from proven success. Other delegates nodded respectfully as he passed. Some even stepped aside to let him through, a gesture of deference that would have been unthinkable just a short time ago. The Galactic Mediation Corps had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. What started as a small experimental program now employed over 300 professionals from 24 different species. They had successfully mediated or helped resolve 47 territorial disputes, trade disagreements, and cultural conflicts across the galaxy. Daniel served as the Corps director for 18 months before deciding it was time to return to Earth. He wanted to train the next generation of human diplomats, to share everything he had learned. His replacement was a Velcorian named Talrin, the same delegate who had abstained from that first dismissive vote against Earth's proposal so long ago. You built something remarkable here, Talrin told Daniel during the transition meeting. The galaxy is more stable because of the work you started. Daniel smiled modestly. I just provided a framework. The real work was done by species choosing dialogue over violence. Do not diminish your achievement, Talron said seriously. Before Earth spoke up, the Council was locked in old patterns. We had forgotten how to innovate, how to see problems from new angles. You reminded us that wisdom can come from unexpected sources. Back on Earth, Daniel found himself in demand as a speaker and teacher. Universities wanted him to lecture on galactic diplomacy. Military academies invited him to discuss conflict resolution. News organizations requested interviews about humanity's place among the stars. But the meeting he cared about most was the one with Secretary Martin Ellis in Geneva. They sat in the same office where Martin had composed that historic transmission 2 years earlier. The view of the city looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed. The Council has formally requested that Earth take a permanent seat on the Security Committee, Martin told him. That puts us in the top tier of galactic political influence. 5 species only, including us. Daniel nodded slowly. Because of the mediation core? Because of everything, Martin corrected. The core, yes. But also because Earth has proven we can contribute meaningfully to galactic affairs. Our technological innovations, our diplomatic approaches, our different way of seeing problems. The galaxy has recognized that humanity brings genuine value. It almost did not happen, Daniel said quietly. If that first vote had gone differently, if they had accepted our initial proposal without the drama, we might have failed. We might have proven them right that we were not ready. Martin considered that. Maybe. Or maybe we needed that rejection to motivate us to do better. Sometimes being underestimated can be an advantage. The conversation turned to the future. Earth was expanding rapidly now, establishing colonies on 17 worlds and mining operations throughout the outer rim. Human scientists had made breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel that impressed even ancient civilizations. Human artists and musicians were becoming popular across multiple species. Humanity was not just surviving among the stars. It was thriving, but Martin had concerns. We need to be careful not to become arrogant ourselves. It would be easy to start thinking we are superior because we succeeded where others expected us to fail. Daniel agreed completely. That is exactly what I want to teach the next generation of diplomats. Confidence without arrogance, pride without superiority. We earned respect through competence and hard work, not through claiming we are better than older civilizations. Over the following months, Daniel established a training program for human diplomats at the new Galactic Affairs Academy outside Geneva. He brought in instructors from multiple species, including both Krell and Xanthar veterans who had participated in the historic mediation. One of his first students was a young woman named Julie Martinez, who reminded him of himself years earlier. Eager, idealistic, perhaps a bit naive about the complexities of galactic politics. Is it true the Council laughed at you? Julie asked during one of their private discussions. Daniel nodded. They did. 46 species voted against our proposal, 0 in favor. It was humiliating. But you did not give up. No, Daniel agreed, because giving up would have meant accepting that humanity did not matter, that our voice was not worth hearing. Sometimes you have to fight for the right to be taken seriously. Julie thought about that carefully. Do you think other young species face the same challenges? Being dismissed because they are new? Probably, Daniel said. Which is why the Mediation Corps now has a specific outreach program to emerging civilizations. We help them find their voice in galactic affairs. We give them the tools and support to prove themselves. The training program grew rapidly. Within a year, Earth was producing some of the most sought-after diplomats in the galaxy. Other species specifically requested human mediators for complex disputes. The fresh perspective that had once been mocked was now actively desired. Meanwhile, the territories that had nearly sparked a galactic war were thriving. The 3 Xanthar cultural systems had become pilgrimage sites visited by species from across the galaxy. The 8 systems transferred to Krell control were producing resources that supported their population expansion exactly as predicted. And the 6 jointly administered zones had evolved into models of interspecies cooperation. A permanent mixed population of Krell and Xanthar now lived and worked in those joint zones. Young Krell, who had never known a time before the treaty, grew up playing with young Xanthar. Cultural exchanges happened naturally. Prejudices that had lasted millennia were beginning to break down. Commander Zax, now retired from military service, visited Earth to speak at the Galactic Affairs Academy. Daniel hosted him personally, showing him around Geneva and introducing him to students. I was wrong about humanity, Zax admitted during a quiet dinner. His mandibles clicked in patterns that the translator rendered as embarrassment. When you first proposed mediation, I thought you were naive children playing at adult affairs. I was certain you would fail. Many species thought the same, Daniel said diplomatically. But you proved us wrong, Zax continued. Not through military might, though you clearly possessed it. Not through economic pressure or political manipulation. You succeeded through genuine competence and innovative thinking. That is more impressive than any show of force. Envoy Loon sent a similar message from the Xanthar homeworld. The energy being's communication pulsed with colors indicating deep respect. Earth taught the galaxy an important lesson. Age does not guarantee wisdom. Experience does not guarantee effectiveness. Sometimes the newest voice in the room has the clearest vision. 3 years after the historic mediation, the Galactic Council held a special ceremony at Station Harmony. They were dedicating a new wing of the diplomatic complex, specifically designed for conflict resolution and mediation work. Daniel attended as part of the Earth delegation. Though he no longer held any official position, Archon Vorath gave a speech that acknowledged how much the galaxy had changed. 3 years ago, humanity offered to help prevent a war. We laughed. We dismissed them. We treated Earth's offer as the naive proposal of an inexperienced species that did not understand galactic realities. The Archon paused, its 12 limbs moving in patterns that indicated genuine humility. We were wrong. Humanity showed us that new perspectives have value, that innovation matters more than tradition, that sometimes the galaxy needs voices that challenge our assumptions. The new wing was named the Hayes Center for Diplomatic Innovation. Daniel felt embarrassed by the honor but accepted it gracefully. This center represents not just Earth's achievement, but the galaxy's willingness to listen and learn. That matters more than any individual contribution. That evening, Daniel stood alone on an observation deck looking out at the stars. He thought about how far humanity had come, from being mocked in the council chamber to having a diplomatic center named after him, from being dismissed as primitive to being sought out for expertise and guidance. But he also thought about the cost of that success. The risk Earth had taken by revealing its hidden capabilities, the months of stress and pressure during the mediation, the very real possibility that failure would have set humanity back for generations. Secretary Martin Ellis found him there, looking out at the cosmos. Having deep thoughts, Ambassador? Daniel smiled at the title. He had not been an active ambassador for over a year now, just reflecting on how much has changed, and how easily it could have gone differently. That is the nature of all significant achievements, Martin replied. They always involved risk. The question is whether the potential reward justifies that risk. Was it worth it? Daniel asked. Everything we gambled? Martin stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. Earth is now a major voice in galactic affairs. Human diplomats are sought throughout the galaxy. Our technological and cultural contributions are valued. Our perspective is respected. Yes, Daniel, it was absolutely worth it. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships come and go from the station's docking bays, vessels from dozens of species, each with their